Okay, Site 222, Unit 5. This is part 3. We're just kind of winding up the Understanding Genocide chapter. We were talking about collectivist versus socialist, collectivist versus individualist cultures, and how there are different challenges as a function of trying to get social movements up and running, right? And in an individualist culture, one strategy is to try to get people into a collectivist frame of mind so that they are willing to sacrifice and work for group goals. And part of that is appealing to stuff like patriotism, nationalism, family, duty, right, and all of that stuff. And, painting the outgroup as dangerous, as scary, and as somehow not human. So an individualist and democratic culture reduces the risk that social movements will develop this kind of collective identity. Of course, all societies need some level of collective identity in order to survive. It's imperative that we, develop ways to harness the positive power of collective impulses in ways that don't set the stage for violence. Like increasing the in-group, so that we broaden our sense of who our people are, right? Which brings us to chapter 7 of Becoming Evil. This is James Waller, Psychological Construction of the Other. Make sure my timer is going. So Waller makes the point that killing somebody is easier to do when there's distance between the killer and the killee, the perpetrator and the victim. That distance can be physical distance, like dropping bombs from up on high and killing hundreds of people down below. Some bombardiers in World War II, came away feeling like they really hadn't killed anybody because all they did was, let the bombs drop. I'm speaking specifically of a story I heard a colleague of mine. His father was a bombardier in World War II. And one day he asked his dad, did you ever kill anyone in World War II? And his dad said no. He was dropping bombs on people, and yet he came away from that experience with the sense that he really hadn't himself killed anybody. There was physical distance there, right? It's easier to press a button and somewhere far away people die as a result than to actually be face to face with someone and kill them, right? So there's physical distance, there's moral distance, right? So if we can somehow create this divide where our victims are not human, are subhuman, are dangerous, are wicked, right? Then we are in a position of moral superiority, and that permits us to aggress against them. Psychological distance, saying that the victim is inhuman. Here in this rather amazing image, they are seen as, bacteria or viruses. So there's psychological distance there in saying they're not our species, they are completely different. So here's a pertinent quote. Well before the physical death of the German Jews, the German racial community, the man and woman on the street, the real ordinary Germans, made Jews suffer social death every day. Remember the steps on the continuum of destruction, right? In the beginning, it was all about separating the Jews out from the rest of society and distancing society from them. We don't do business with them. They don't teach our children. They don't hold positions of power. They can't even vote. We can't marry them or have sex with them, and on, right? They are completely separate and dangerous and inferior. So the social death of victims is a step in that continuum of destruction. They die as humans conceptually before they die physically. Then there's us versus them thinking, right? Which is what's behind in-group, out-group stuff. So this brings us to the Robbers Cave study. Muzaffar Sharif and colleagues, published in 1954. I do have a YouTube clip to share with you, so make sure you take a look at that. It will be below the lecture videos. So in the Robbers Cave study, Sharif wanted to demonstrate how easy it is to make two groups of people hate each other. And then he wanted to explore if there are ways to repair that rift. So he got 22 11-year-old boys who were going camping, separated them into two groups at a campsite, right? Randomly separated them into two groups, and each group did not know the other group existed in the beginning, right? They went separately to this campground called the Robbers Cave State Park, and they were in nearby but separate camps. And he allowed them to name themselves. So one group called themselves the Rattlers, one group called themselves the Eagles. There was a period of time where they just sort of did team building exercises, right? Getting to know each other. And then within a few days, they were told there's this other camp of boys not too far away, and you're going to be competing with them. So they set up competitions where one group's win was the other's loss, right? Things like whether you get dessert tonight depends on whether you won the competition. And pretty quickly, hostility escalated, right? It was pretty easy to create hatred between these two groups. It got so bad so fast that the two groups couldn't be together without violence breaking out, without kids attacking each other, throwing things at each other. Each group described the other in strongly negative terms, right? Overcoming their attitudes was not accomplished by mere contact. So the solution to solving, repairing this rift, solving this hatred, wasn't just to force them to be in the same space together. The solution, as it turned out, was getting them to work together on superordinate goals. So Sharif created these emergencies where, like, both camps of boys had to work together. Things like the generator going out or the supply truck getting stuck in a ditch, and all the kids had to work together. And as they worked together, their sense of in-group versus out-group kind of dissipated. And they started to get to know the other kids as people, right? So I do have this cool Heineken ad I want you to take a look at. It will be down below the lectures too. It's almost 5 minutes long, so it's not a typical ad that runs, 30-second spot on TV or something. But it's cool, and it speaks to this idea of having to work together to break down barriers. So our minds are compelled to define the limits of the tribe, right? We are evolved such that we live in groups, and we want to know who our peeps are. So kinship is this important organizing principle for most societies in the world. This us versus them happens wherever human beings are, right? There's my people, and then there's other people. And it's also true that we see us, our in-group, as better than them, whoever the out-group is. So my group, my people, we're the good ones, we're the right ones, we're the best ones, right? This is what's behind school rivalries and patriotism and nationalism, right? Gangs rumbling against each other. Us versus them, in-group versus out-group. So where does this come from, right? This us versus them thinking. Well, we could speak about ethnocentrism, which is a fancy term for the belief that your own group is the right group, right? Your own group is the best group. So we can talk about the ethnocentrism of cultures. Xenophobia, which is a fancy term for being afraid of outsiders, seeing the out-group as dangerous, right? And seeing them as, scapegoats for all the problems of society, blaming them for everything that's going wrong. We can talk about the fact that a lot of good things about human beings, sociability, altruism, cooperation, all that stuff goes hand in hand with the evolution of animosity, because those good things are all about helping your in-group, right? And then the flip side of that is you do not have to confer those options to the out-group. So we cooperate with some to compete against others. There's no us without a them, right? So having a tribe, having your people, sacrificing for your family, that also means that you are drawing boundaries around who your people are and everybody else. So here's a kind of interesting quote along those lines. because they instinctively tell men precisely whom to bond with versus whom to fight against, xenophobia and ethnocentrism are the most dangerously manipulable facets of war psychology that promote genocide, right? So invoking that stuff, xenophobia and ethnocentrism, that strikes to some deep kind of wiring in the human animal. And it can get people on board and, all revved up to fight against the dangerous other. So this is Steven Pinker. And Steven Pinker points out, he's a very famous Harvard psychologist. He's written some awesome books. I recommend, if you're looking for some good reading, to have a look at Pinker's books. He points out that the progress of civilization can be tied to the expansion of the moral circle, right? Outward from the family and village to the clan, the tribe, the nation, the race, and most recently, as in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to all of humanity, right? So we can look at the progress of civilization in terms of, the expanding moral circle. To whom should we apply ethics? To whom do we have moral obligations, right? From myself to my friends and family, to everyone in my country, to all living humans, future generations. We could go beyond non-human animals, all living things, ecosystems, the planet, right? The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? So it's kind of a related issue. Should we expand the moral circle beyond our species, right? And if we do, boy, do we have a mess to clean up with the way that we treat other species, right? But he's saying, as civilization progresses, our moral circle expands. But it's dynamic. The moral circle can constrict, right? It can get tight again when times get tough, in times of fear, when there's hatred, ignorance, scarcity of resources. The moral circle constricts, and now it's just about, I'm just going to take care of my people, right? And so you see, things like this. Feed 10,000 Syrian rebels. How about we take care of the 50,000 homeless American veterans instead? That's a constriction of the moral circle, right? Which says, no, we're just going to take care of our people. They are more important than those other people who are probably dangerous. Look at the word rebels there. A more appropriate term might be refugees, right? And it also creates this false dichotomy, which says, if we help one group, then we're not helping another, right? Mommy, Daddy, our new neighbors are moving in. The taxpayer-funded ISIS relocation program coming to your neighborhood. This is an anti-Syrian refugee meme. This was a couple of years ago. The Syrian refugee problem is still a problem, but there was all this furor in the United States around whether we should take in refugees, Syrian refugees. Lots of countries did. The United States had a real problem with it. So we didn't take in a whole bunch of people. And the idea was, we've got our own problems to deal with, right? And this outgroup is dangerous. So there was a conflating of the victims of terrorism with the perpetrators of terrorism. Placing the victim outside of the universal moral obligation may well be a necessary condition for genocide, right? Constricting the moral circle so that it doesn't include a group of people means you don't have to behave morally or ethically towards that other group, right? It opens the door for immoral, unethical treatment. Moral disengagement is a gradual process of detachment where some groups are placed outside the boundary within which moral values, rules, and considerations of fairness apply, right? So morally detaching ourselves from some group's fate means we don't have to really fret about it, right? The rules don't apply with those people, with that group. Okay. Here's another visual from the US's recent struggle with helping refugees. No more refugees, no more illegals, we're full. Right? This is a kind of intolerant message that constricts the moral circle, right? We don't need to care about those people. first of all, they're illegals, whatever that means. How can a human being be illegal? Yeah, and we've got our own issues. We're full. Okay, I'm going to pause here and we will pick it up in the next one.